This year at Licensed Trade International, we wanted to unlock the secrets of the North to share with the trade. So we decided to enlighten you with this shining star in the North, demonstrating the secrets of the monks with Belgian-style beers formulated by the trapists in monasteries, now being brewed in the UK at the Abbey, presented by Sean McFetrich and Fr Terrence.
Where the monastery was, ran the brewery, which had a license originally from the Dukes of Lorraine and then subsequently from the King of France. So Louis XIV, the Sun King, for instance, gave them a license to export beer anywhere across France. And that supported the monastery. It allowed the monks to engage in their training, to keep the monastery going and to do all their other work. We were kicked out of France at the French Revolution and came back to England, and eventually settled in North Yorkshire at Ampleforth. For some reason, we didn't restore the brewery. We started a school instead. But more recently, we've gone back to that tradition of brewing beer and making cider and other drinks. And so in a sense, we've returned to something which we were doing for nearly 200 years in France, and which, of course, many continental monasteries do even to this day, in Belgium, in Germany, and in other places. So I hope you're going to enjoy drinking Ampleforth Abbey beer.
Thanks, Father Terrence. As Father Terrence explained, once we decided we were going to make the beer and to restart the brewing process, the monastic history of brewing, we obviously needed to find a partner to do that with. So we undertook some painstaking research with a number of breweries in the area. We wanted someone who was regional, who was from Yorkshire, to tie in, obviously, with the regional aspect of our beer production. And we also wanted someone who understood the sort of history and tradition and the type of beer we were looking to produce. We wanted to produce an Abbey-style beer, obviously in line with the fact we were an Abbey, in a Trappist style. So much in the line of Chimay or Westfaletten or some of the Trappist breweries in Belgium. So we ended up working with a fantastic brewery called Little Valley Brewery, based over near Hebden Bridge. And we, with their head brewer, Wim van der Spek, who's a master brewer, we went over to Belgium, and we were very fortunate. We had one of the monks with us. We were very fortunate to visit a number of the Trappist breweries and to actually see the brewing process being undertaken, which I'm led to believe is not always very easy. And as a result of that, we were able to put together we were able to put together the style of beer that we wanted to produce, and Wim and Little Valley then undertook that production process for us. And the beer has been in production since July last year. We've had quite a lot of publicity with regards to the introduction of the beer, and hopefully the VT is ready. We're just going to show you a couple of clips from BBC News. One is from BBC North Yorkshire News, or Yorkshire News, and then there was also a national piece of BBC News we got as well. So if we could just run the VT.
Ampleforth Abbey, nestling in North Yorkshire's Howardian Hills, home to a community of Benedictine monks, a place of pilgrimage for anyone interested in theology, history, architecture, monastic life, or booze.
Now, you've all seen the cider, and Cameron's shown you around the cider.
This is the Abbey's cider mill tour. Benedictines have a tradition in cider, brandy and winemaking dating back to the 17th century. But today, the Father Prior is introducing a new tipple.
You may not know that we've just started, or restarted, brewing beer as well as cider. This goes back to the 17th century, and this is the stuff. And we've only just started remaking this. Would anybody like to try it?
Yes. Oh, yes.
But let's leave the enthusiastic tasters of Sinnington, WI, and travel back in time to when the Benedictines were living in exile in France.
We started off making beer like many monasteries did, just because you couldn't drink the water. But over time, we started to produce that beer for the local Duke of Lorraine, and from then it was sold more widely and then ultimately all over France. Now, the recipe was just, in effect, our home brew, which then just developed. So it was an English-style beer, double fermented, though, like many monastic beers are these days, And it was
distinctive taste?
just very distinctive taste, malty, fruity, hoppy. It was called La Bière Anglaise, and it was said to have a champagne sparkle.
Today's Abbey beer weighs in at a hefty 7%. Not a quaffing beer then, but certainly a spiritual comfort on a special occasion. Peter Lugg, BBC Look North, Ampleforth.
Okay, we could show the other BBC clip.
It's a life of prayer and song, a life devoted to God. But even Father Jeremy and Father Woolston need to pay the bills.
Apologies, we seem to have lost the sound. I'll keep it running just so you can see the pictures. This is Little Valley Brewery, Father Jeremy working with Wim van der Spek, the head brewer. And I think, as we're all aware, the growth in the premium bottle ale market at the moment is very big. And here the BBC were just putting some facts and figures together about the growth of that market. And obviously that's an important aspect of why our beer, I think, is doing reasonably well at the moment, is that we're providing a craft beer. It's a very unique beer. We're the only monastery in the UK producing our own beer with Little Valley. And so therefore we feel there's a big market out there which we're trying to tap into. The monks oversee the production in terms of they're still involved in the accounts. They approve a lot of the sales and marketing we do. So the monks are fully integrated and involved in the overall beer process and production, although they're not actually making the beer themselves. So that just gives you a bit of an outline. Sorry about the loss of sound there. I think that was actually the BBC clip rather than the guys here. So sorry we lost the sound there, but it just gave you a flavour of the interest I think we've had in terms of the beer and also how we work with Little Valley. You may have heard in the first piece there was talk about the orchard, and I'd briefly like to just talk, or get Father Terrence to briefly talk about the history of the orchard at Ampleforth and how that's now being used to make our own cider.
The orchards at Ampleforth go back rather longer. They go back into probably pre-war. And I'm sure to start with, they were started to provide manual labor for monks. The traditional thing is that particularly the novices in the afternoons would do some work outside. And orchard work is quite a convenient source of useful work that is rewarding in its own right, but also produces a crop which is worth something in terms of consumption. The actual apple trees as we have them now were largely planted in the 1960s and 70s in order to provide a succession of fruit for the school and for the monastery. So individual varieties of apples were chosen so that some would be released straight away, straight after picking, because they were already ripe. Some others needed to be stored for 2 or 3 weeks, some others for a month or two, and then some right through the winter and just released in the spring. The same was true of the cooking apples, so that the kitchens could have a reliable supply of fruit in order to make crumbles and pies and that sort of thing. That's how things worked. But I suppose more recently, people are more interested in other sorts of fruit, maybe, and there's less apples being eaten by the students in the school. But anyway, one way or another, we found we had a surplus amount of fruit. And so there was experiments done to produce cider from the fruit. And particularly Father Reiner was behind this development. He worked very hard and produced varieties of cider, and then indeed planted additional trees in order to be able to give the right balance of sugar and acidity and all the other things that you need in order to produce the right blend in order to make a good cider. After making the cider, then he began to develop further and had some distilled, and so we now have a cider brandy which is available and is now about 10 years old, I think, and is really quite powerful stuff. And in addition to that, he's blended the brandy with other fruit to produce flavored brandies, peach brandy, and all sorts of other exotic flavors, and also experimented with different forms of gin as well, sloe gin, damson gin, and so on. So we actually have a whole variety of fruit-based alcoholic drinks that are made at Ampleforth, and the monks are still involved very much in the picking of the apples and sometimes also in the processing of the cider. So it's more of a home industry maybe than others are.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's worth saying that a lot of people felt that Ampleforth weren't going to be able to produce a cider that would, stand alongside a lot of your more traditional producers down in the southwest. Ampleforth use a variety of cooking apples and eating apples to make the cider, whereas a lot of the other cider producers are using specific cider apples. So I think that gives us a very unique taste. Every year, the taste of the cider is going to be slightly different depending on the blend of apples. We use about 60% eating apples and 40% cooking apples. Of the eating apples, there are over 50 varieties in the orchard. So Cameron, our orchard manager, tries his best to sort of put the blend together in a similar way each year. But like it with the wine, each year is going to have a slightly different taste. So we are very unique again in that respect in terms of how we produce the cider, where it's made, with probably one of the largest commercial orchards in the north of England. But like with all cider makers, we're suffering from the vagaries of the weather at the moment. Last year was a particularly poor crop. But again, unlike other cider producers, we all use real apples. We press the apples ourselves, and we sometimes have to rely on other apple providers in the area. So although the apples will have an Ampleforth blend, sometimes we do take apples from other people with orchards in the sort of a 10-15 mile radius of Ampleforth. Father Terrence also mentioned the fact that we have these other products as well. So we make our own cider brandy. We don't distill it. Someone does that on our behalf. But when we have the distilled spirits, we put that in oak barrels, and that's aged for 5 years to make the cider brandy. And then we've started adding some fruit extracts to that product. So we've now got, as Father Terrence explained, our fruit brandies as well. And we also have our apple liqueur, which is the apple juice mixed back with the cider to produce, the spirits to produce the apple liqueur. So we have a number of products. We think we have a fairly wide range, a unique range of products. And because of that, we're actually getting lots of interest, and we've had some good press coverage as well. In terms of where we're selling, we mainly sell at the moment in the North Yorkshire area through independents, farm shops, delis, and things like that. We are in with a few bars, pubs and clubs, but I think our main market is probably off sales, and it's a growing market, and we've had a lot of interest. We're in Booths, which is a reasonably sized supermarket chain in the north, and mainly in Lancashire, but some stores in Yorkshire. We're also in Tesco's in the North Yorkshire area, about 30 stores. So it's small beginnings, but I think we're going to see some good growth, and the cider market is obviously growing at a good rate, as is the premium bottled beer market. And I think that was shown, whereas we've had some good publicity, as you've seen from the news clips, but we also were invited just before Christmas to be part of Jamie Oliver's new show, which was called Jimmy and Jamie's Food Fight Club. I don't know if any of you saw this. It's sort of the top gear for food, I think, was how they described it. Basically, it was 4 programs or 5 programs. They took a different category of food or drink each week, and then they competed that against a rival European country. So for the beer program, we were one of the 5 beers that they chose as in the Abbey beer category. We then went over to Belgium and we competed against one of the Trappist beers. Obviously, they've had a bit more experience and length of time in their brewing process than we have, but the whole program went out just before Christmas. I put together some clips which just shows the Ampleforth beer. It's about 2.5, 3 minutes long, and it will just give you, again, a flavour of the beer and some of the interesting PR we've had behind it.
On tonight's Food Fight Club, we're going to take on the Belgians at beer.
All specials on today. This is all stuff that's great with beer.
We've handpicked half a dozen homegrown beers for our diners, all created by a new generation of amazing artisan beer makers.
I think there has been a time in history where our beer started to become a bit more generic. Yeah. But the last 10 years, there's been a beer revolution. There's so many cool things happening.
And to prove just how good we reckon our beer is these days, we're going to take on the world champions, the Belgians.
Are you ready to take on the Belgians? Yeah! Let's do it.
The Belgians take their beer incredibly seriously. They have over 500 different types of beer, and they treat them with the same respect that the French save for their finest of wines.
Next up, Abbey beers, usually strong and sparkling. It's a category the Belgians are world famous for.
So here you are, you're an Abbey-style beer from Ampleforth. This is a cloudy beer. No, this means it hasn't been filtered, it hasn't been refined. All that natural goodness, that wonderful stuff.
That, my friend, is amazing. Very like a Belgian beer.
And you'll be up against it in Belgium. It's one of their specialities.
What's the next Abbey beer?
That's it. We only have, at the moment, we only have one sort of monastery actually brewing their own beer. But it's
in the whole of Great Britain?
One, Ampleforth or bust.
It's the morning of our food fight. We're in Brussels with some of Britain's best brewers to challenge Belgium for the title King of Beer. If we win, the mayor has said he will give us a British beer day across the city.
Round 3 is the Abbey beer category, and the Belgians are hot favourites.
There are 8 Trappist breweries in the world. 6 of them are in Belgium. Yes. There is only one Abbey beer in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
One.
We only need one.
They've gone for the world-famous Westmalle Triple, a complex beer with a fruity flavour and creamy texture.
I like the carbonation level.
Up against this giant of a beer is Ampleforth Abbey beer. It's double fermented for a champagne-like finish.
I'm getting a lot of nut.
It's based on the recipe that the monks used to have when they brewed beer in the 1680s.
The Belgians are saying the British beer is looking like it's Irish coffee. I have the results of the jury. The Abbey beers, the winner is Belgium with Westmalle.
Oh, man. We are getting smashed.
That is a terrible result. But you know what? Their brewing culture is ancient, and our British beer revolution is relatively young. So we'll be back, Belgium. Just you wait and see.
We will be back, hopefully, in Belgium and lots of other places around the world as well in time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed our presentation and learned a bit more about Ampleforth and our produce. If you'd like to come and see us on the stand, then please do, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.